Welcome, everyone. It's really nice to have you all here. This is the community takeover. Our wonderful Sudo, who really does some great work around here, he's having a well-deserved break. So we thought we would take advantage of it and stir it up a little bit. Myself and Huck were from Pineapple, the Pineapple Group, who came out of the Shipyard Academy, who some of you are part of. We're super passionate about this space. Hux was unwell this week, so it's really cool that you're here. You're my buddy, and we're joined by wonderful guests, Jaya and Mykola. And Mykola just published a really great piece on a report on the Web3 privacy market. So we'll definitely get a look into that. And yeah, it'll be a really great piece around Lunarpunk and Solarpunk narratives and kind of looking for this mysterious third thing. But before we do that, we're going to do the weekly roundup, just because so much happens around Nym, and it's really cool to stay updated. So Danny, do you want to get
Yes,
started?
I'm going to be doing just the first two pieces to spare a bit of my voice. So the first item on the news weekly roundup is that Nym COO Alexis Russell joined a panel discussion at the Crypto Summit in Zurich and also another one in Davos. And it was called Web3 Ground Zero, Digital Identity and Peer-to-Peer Communication Systems. And it was a great chat where Alexis shared some fascinating insights. And as usual, once the recording of the discussion is made available by the event organizers, it will be shared on the Nym socials, so keep your eyes peeled. And Alexis commented on this in the Nym Telegram group that in reality, I said during the digital identity panel that digital identity is dangerous and we should focus first on tech and reputation models. So and then don't worry, because he made it out of Davos and wasn't kidnapped at the Crypto Summit. The next item on the news roundup is we're super happy, and I'm particularly super happy to announce this today, that Nym have joined the ACLAC Alliance, which is the Alliance for Encryption in Latin America and Caribbean, which promotes and protects encryption in the region. And that is, I think, fantastic and very much needed on those continents or in those regions. And then if maybe Jaya, if you want to share some thoughts on this, feel free to, be joined. Yes, thank you for the link. And then with that, I just give the mic over to Vesta to take over the next piece of news.
Cool. Well, Nym just dropped a fresh highlights video for December, January. So if you were busy, obviously during the holiday season, this is a quick condensed summary. I don't know about you guys, but I really love the music that they use in that. It's super cool. Also, Nym dropped a blog post summarizing how you can make use of the currently existing Nym technologies. So there are a bunch of highlights in that. Obviously, we have Nym Connect, which helps us to connect through our apps that we're currently using with privacy-enhancing apps. We've got PasteNym, which is a Mixnet-based anonymous file and text dropping tool, courtesy of our wonderful friends from No Trust Verify. Some of you guys are here. And an Ethereum transaction submitter and RPC mixer. There's also the Cosmos broadcaster. And in there, we've also mentioned Pineapple's GitHub repository, and we've got a bunch of resources in there. Also, another point, we are looking for community suggestions on what apps you folks like to use, what you would like to see privacy enhanced through Nym Connect. So if you have any ideas, definitely make sure to share them on any of the channels here. There are lots of great community members keeping track of our conversations here. Also, there will be a series of articles going out on the lectures that happen at Shipyard Academy. So for a lot of us, that information was so great from the lectures. So keep an eye out for that. And I'll pass it on to Jaya for an update on the rewards.
Hey, yo, everyone. So we had a whole bunch of community activity towards the end of last year, which included wrapping up Shipyard Academy, of course, which the fantastic Pineapple Proxy crew came out of. And then shortly after that, we did the big test and earn push, to stress test the Nym MixNet and really see how far we could go with the Nym Connect. And of course, all of these activities are, due for rewards. So just a heads up that there's going to be a whole bunch of KYCing happening next week. I think at some point we should do a whole community call on KYC. I think there's a lot of interesting things to discuss there, including what a privacy-preserving KYC system might look like, and also the kind of weird interactions between regulation and the development of tech, right? And, I could go off on a long tangent here, both when it comes to KYC and the way that GDPR affected the internet. But I'll hold off on that for another community call. So for those of you who were involved in any of these programs, do stay tuned. We're going to send out a bunch of information about that and take you through the KYC process next week. And that goes for Shipyard Academy, people for Test and Earn, and also finally for the NYMF testnet crew. So people who took part in the NYMF testnet, what feels like a very long time ago now. We're going to be sending out some special information to you. Thanks for holding on for so long, and your rewards are coming up. And then, of course, after having been through the wonderful process of Shipyard Academy, which I think was enjoyable for everybody, we are going to have a Shipyard Academy round 2. But for those of you who graduated as NIMJAs, or as sailmakers, the NIMJA applications are going to be coming up next. So we're going to be outlining the actual roles and responsibilities of what you can do and what you can apply for and what kind of rewards you can get as a NIMJA. And we're really looking forward to that because it's a super important step for us. The whole process of the Shipyard Academy was really a process to enable decentralization and give decentralization really a strong boost. Because the best way to decentralize is for people to have ownership over a project, and the best way for people to have ownership over a project is for them to understand the project deeply. And so that was what we were trying to facilitate with the Academy. And it's been great to see so much good response from the community and to see the community self-organizing. So the next step for us is to really give that a boost via the NIMJA process. So information about that will be coming up end of the month, maybe early February, depending on how slammed we get with other stuff. But we're aiming for end of the month to start the NIMJA process going. What else on the community front? Yeah, also end of the month, we're hoping to have a bit more of an outline for what a delegations program could look like to give a bit of a boost to mixed nodes and gateways who are starting to be set up in areas that are underrepresented. So, and once again, this is part of the decentralization strategy. A project like NIM really does need, NIM mixed nodes and strong communities spread across the world, really, for a lot of different reasons. And so, we're starting to see a good number of mixed nodes popping up in Latin America. We're starting to see the first ones starting to appear in the African continent. And we want to make sure that these important parts of the infrastructure survive. So yeah, stay tuned for the delegations program as well. And what else on the community front? I think that is it for now. Yeah, just keep your eyes on the channels. The kind of updates will be coming soon. Is that our roundup? Did Pseudo pass on anything else to you guys to say?
No, I think he was quite thorough.
Thank you, Jaya, for reading that out. And now,
yeah, cool.
No, go ahead. I was just really excited, but you go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, it's wonderful that we have our 3 wonderful guests here, Jeremy, Jaya, and Mykola. It'll be lovely to hear from each of you, a really brief introduction about yourself. And so we've kind of picked you guys a little bit, Jeremy, you're leaning towards more of the Solarpunk vibe. Mykola, you're leaning towards more Lunarpunk, and Jaya, mysterious third thing. Obviously, we're going to discuss around various things, but you can summarize a little bit about how you see that. Perhaps we can start with Jeremy.
There's the mute button. I found it. Nobody panic, guys. My name's Jeremy with Regions Unite and WiseCrowds Liberating Structures DAO. I guess I'm Solarpunk. I guess so. I'm definitely out there. I've doxed myself more than once. Everybody knows where I live and the piece of earth that I'm trying to tend. I'm also a huge fan of in-person, face-to-face events because it's the most fast and effective way to get to know each other and build trust. And when I think about the immense amount of work that, sort of unfucking the planet sort of requires, I think incredible amounts of trust are an accelerator to doing that work. Yeah. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Beautiful. Mykola, do you...
Yeah. First, here's a joke. I'm first human, and then I'm a fan of K-punk, which is Mark Fisher's pseudonym, but he
Nice.
committed suicide. So I'm not sure that I want to go to that extreme. And basically, I spent 10 years doing surveillance capitalism, working in digital agencies, both in Ukraine and Russia, serving from Coca-Cola to MasterCard, so many brands.
Wait, can I just stop? Can I just ask if I understood what you just said? So you were doing surveillance capitalism. This is what you're saying. You're a part of the machine.
I used to.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
I mean, yeah, so basically, I was a part of this, at that moment, super cool marketplace for jobs, and I grew super well within the industry, and I was serving from Coca-Cola to MasterCard, like digital agencies, PR agencies, CRM, like cutting edge MarTech stack, from performance marketing to mobile advertising, data aggregation, all these things. But I think that my why, let's say, I pay attention to Lunarpunks a bit is because I grew politically a lot within the last, I don't know, like 10 years maybe, within the revolutions that happened in Ukraine, within the big disillusion of the Russian state and government, and I moved to Barcelona eventually. And for the last, I don't know, like 5 years, I'm helping startups, like tech startups, primarily blockchain, AI, try to change the rules of the game. I worked for 5 years with the tech guys behind the Belarus opposition. They were trying to disrupt science and knowledge sharing and return the IP ownership to the creators, which was fun. And now I think that privacy could be a really interesting torch that we could, which we could promote not just human rights, but communicate also the downsides of the surveillance capitalism, of the protection of the people, like, for example, in regions that are occupied by Russia, where disclosure of your sensitive data could lead to your basic death. The same goes to Iran, China, and many other countries. And the last but not least, don't like ideologies, but what I like about Lunarpunk is that basically these guys understood the necessity for that each Marvel needs their own DC. And in this sense, they use speculative fiction as a myth-making machine. And it's a rare example of the industry that uses really complex myth-making to create a certain communal unionizing, basically, like that.
Thank you. And Jaya?
Yeah, so that's super interesting and good to meet you both, Mykola and Jeremy. I'm still very curious about how you got into privacy, Mykola, because you've been so active in the space and in the public debate. I'm seeing you put together this fantastic report. You've been doing a lot of industry-wide analysis on blockchain tech. So I would love for us to spend a little bit of time during the call talking through your report, if that's okay. But back to the question that Vesta put towards me. Am I the mysterious third thing? Am I into the mysterious third thing? I mean, first of all, I think the reason why I'm pushing for a mysterious third thing is because when you have solar, lunar, you have night and day, things become very polarized very quickly, in ways that are not always super productive, and that also kind of skew the understanding of these concepts in different ways. And so I would probably say that I'm leaning, in some ways with a mysterious third thing, a little bit towards lunar. I mean, partially, okay, I work for Nym. Nym is obviously a privacy project. So the emphasis on privacy is absolutely there. But I think the lunar, exactly as an opposition to solar, tends to become, quite misunderstood. So there's a lot of different ways that you could interpret the lunar. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of understand what it means to go dark or what darkness means and so on and so forth, that I think is like, it kind of it draws together, or it draws from various like quite deep historical and philosophical traditions in the West, right? We have this thing of the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment is perceived very much as good, and that the concept of eyesight, the concept of the sense of seeing, is very much conflated with the understanding of the way that we understand knowledge in the West, right? And the way that we understand scientific discovery, and also the way that we associate, or how we associate, accountability. When in actual fact, there's a lot more going on there, right? Like there's ways of knowing that draws on other senses that, I think when you consider the dark, or you consider, darkness, the nighttime, and so on and so forth, there's a lot more going on there than just like, an absolute shutdown of all communication and a kind of war of all against all, which I think was that Paul's, the article that you guys shared that Paul Innes wrote. Where this idea of like darkness or lunar, is conflated with dystopia. It's conflated with a state of perpetual war, a state of perpetual Cold War, of absolute infosec, where nobody quite knows who each other are, and nobody quite knows what the other person might do, because everyone's potentially always an enemy, right? And I think that, so for me, it's a little bit, it's jumping too quickly to the idea of dystopia. And it's also jumping very quickly to the idea of darkness as a negative thing, as the absence of light, as the absence of accountability, in ways that I don't actually think serves the privacy narrative very well. So that's why I'm pushing for a third thing. And I see the third thing more as a kind of a more sensitive exploration of what privacy means, what we associate with the dark, what we associate with darkness, what we associate with the nighttime. And I think, actually, I'm going to stop it there, but I could go on for a while, because I think the philosophical discussion here actually runs quite deep, and it's a piece of work that I think is well worth undertaking.
Oh yeah, and this is the first of many instances, I think, where we can go deep on this. So yeah, thank you all. And us coming from Pineapple, I don't know if some of you know this, but the origins of the kind of the pineapple meme or whatever, it came from the fact that there's this divisive, like this question of do you like pineapples on your pizza or not? Or like, do you like cats or dogs? And I attribute this to Danny. Sorry, Hux. You came up with this, and sorry, docs you. But we're kind of like opening up conversations that tend to kind of polarize people, and try to see where we can harness duality and actually make these things. Because narrative is, as we'll explore in this, like narrative actually can play a huge role in how you then apply technology, use technology, as associate it with different things. So together, I think we're understanding there's a bit of this kind of paradox between the openness and transparency that we have with the solarpunk aesthetic, the technologies that come along with it, the different kind of cultures that are associated with it, the cultural values, versus kind of this closed off privacy sense of lunarpunk. And I think with all of our guests here, before we go any further, I'd really like to step into the shoes of each one and have a bit of an activity where perhaps for a little bit we can go into the shoes of Solarpunk, where we, think about perhaps just 3 things that we like about it, that we're drawn to about it, 3 things that we don't like about it, and then we can jump into the shoes of a Lunarpunk and do the same activity there. And I think that's enough to get us going. And then after that, perhaps we can start harnessing the duality and something that's coming in between, in the middle of that. How does that sound?
Yeah, let's try it.
Cool. Does anyone here want to go first in terms of let's start with the Solarpunk?
Can I add one comment here? So
Yeah.
I would drop an argument here, but think of this as an argument in the ancient Greek tradition when it's not a critics in sense of blaming or polarization. It's the comment on finding a certain middle way, like a Tao way. And in this sense, I think that what I've seen from the industry, maybe Solarpunks would be kind of like representatives of the industry, that sometimes like this positivistic view on the world doesn't correlate with what's happening around us. So in this sense, lots of the people who are trying to live a life like positivistic life, and I'm not talking about just technology, but as a lifestyle, they kind of try to approach challenges in this patriotic way when they don't they don't themselves fall down, and they always kind of try to keep a good smile on the face. So everything what they do should be always societal good or beneficial or perfect in times. And there's a super simple argument here. When I was in Uganda in September, people don't have unlimited internet. They don't have notebooks at home. They have a limited megabytes that they pay each month, and they use kind of apps like WhatsApp because they don't have an internet traffic. So sometimes this positivistic view on society or on the world clashes with the reality that it's a bit harsher in this sense.
I'll play. I would say, and that's intentional. That's a feature of the space rather than a bug. I mean, I think there's so much about the way the world operates that I would wholeheartedly reject. That I would just say, you know what? That game is fundamentally fucked, and I don't want to play it. That actually encourages me to take a pretty aggressive stand, actually, towards a space that is willfully abandoning some of the shittier aspects of the way things are organized. I imagine it thusly, that there is a bright future that certainly does not exist. But if I can anchor my awareness, just like if I was running a marathon, if I can put my attention onto the fact that there is a finish line, and that if I continue to move my feet accordingly, that I will reach it, that I can actually activate my excitement and enthusiasm about that possibility, which is currently not, right here and now. And I can actually bring into being a shit ton of excitement that is effectively, just a fucking hack. That is me just denying reality and putting all of my excitement on that which I could potentially bring into being. And if I lead really mostly my entire life, or let's just say all of my entire life, living this sort of lie, that I will have lived at least into the direction that and have made it more possible for those that come after me. Anybody else?
Really like to put in a point here. Not just that, but I also think there's a role that fear and hysteria has come to play. And so where we put our attention where it's directed to is really important. And I think over the last couple of years, it has shown just how easy and powerful it is to weave our attention, right? And to create larger patterns of movement. And I think fear and hysteria is something that can really play on us. And so I do see this stance of taking a positive outlook as something really, it's alchemizing fear. And this is a term I really want to introduce into this conversation. I really believe narrative can alchemize fear, but I think yeah, I'm going to leave it at that and see what you guys have to say.
So I don't know. I think the nice thing about Paul's article on Lunarpunks and Solarpunks is how he kind of synthesizes the two, which is that they both, somewhat take a similar approach, but somewhat have a similar analysis, but take a different approach, right? And the analysis is everything is fucked. We need something else. But the assumption on the Lunarpunk side is that everything is bad looking at the present, so therefore we need to, have super strong privacy protections and so on and so forth. So it's like starting from the dystopian premise and acting with the awareness and assumption that you're face to face with the enemy potentially at all times. And then the starting point of Solarpunk is the assumption that focuses on the potential for a positive future, right? So, saying like, yes, everything is terrible right now, and exactly for that reason, we need to keep a positive outlook about what's possible and how we can go, where else we can get to. Which, like, both of those, to me, like the problem that I have with both of those, and again, the reason why I want to move towards a third thing is because I actually think that dystopias and utopias have a way of distorting our ability to read what's going on right here and right now and act from a realist perspective, let's say, rather than a panic perspective. So instead of starting from the starting point of fear and starting from the starting point of like everything is fucked, it's like, okay, there's always a lot going on in the world, and some things are fucked and some things are not so fucked, and we have good days and we have bad days. What exactly do we need to do right here and right now in order to solve specific problems? And I also think that it shuts down for a lot of the imagination that both of these mythologies actually have. Like we could build out so much more within these realms. And, especially in the Lunarpunk realm, to my mind, there's a lot more scope there to do something quite beautiful once we step away from the idea of it having to do with, a kind of war of all against all. And once we step away from the idea that darkness is dystopia and that darkness is a paranoid space. I don't believe darkness has to be a paranoid space at all. I think there's plenty of scope, both in terms of people's real life experiences of what the nighttime can hold for us, and the kinds of treasures that the nighttime and nightlife can hold for us, and the type of camaraderie, the type of togetherness, the way that we open up other senses, in the dark, and what privacy. When it comes to, private communications and private technologies actually enable and open up for. So that's, I think that's why I kind of take an issue with the way that these two mythologies tend to be pitted against one another, because I think it really misses quite a lot of important points, and it shuts down the capacity to build out the mythologies in a much more productive way.
Can I add something? Actually, there's an interesting, let's say, controversy behind the Lunarpunk, because with the radicalism, you could go too far away, and basically you could achieve a short victory, but not a long-term goal. So kind of like you could, like Amir and Rose could, from Darkfire, could surround themselves by 100 comrades, basically armed with the code, and build their own commune somewhere in Switzerland. And that will be all right. That will be great for the small niche community. But the challenge is how to make it bigger And then I, as a communication manager, find also frustration because the end of history is misunderstood within the different cultural contexts. Like in Eastern European context, end of history is like a apocalypse, and basically we will all die. And it's not a regenerative approach of Buddhists who could see life as this never-ending cycle. So there's no props if you die now because karma, and the wheel of birth and death and stuff like that. So I think that end of history is really a false premise to project onto the people. And here I'm super solidar with Jaya that it should be inclusive and not exclusive, and privileged choice for those who could spend their life not working for the boss, but instead do their own small or relevantly small guerrilla tactics around the world. And in this sense, I more leaning towards the Cyborg Manifesto of Donna Haraway. She also uses the speculative fiction in order to broaden the discussion around ethics behind the things what we do. And while I was analyzing the projects who are delivering privacy, rarely they talk about politics. And it's fun because basically decentralization is a political stance. And in this sense, privacy is a political stance. But somehow these projects, they're talking about DeFi, they talk about some sort of fancy VCs on board and other stuff, but not behind the ideology that let these founders or team members contribute to a certain cause. So in this sense, I hope, I'm not sure it would be like that Lunarpunk movement could be used to stress the narration around ethics of the development culture, where then this is the last point, where before developers were called free developers, like basically free from constraints of capitalism, of lots of many other stuff that stopped them to be creative. And now we're stuck in the GitHub that is controlled by Microsoft, Discord that is also the corporation. And the question is like, what kind of ethics we should follow to create a new and interesting future for us that won't be an end of history. Thanks.
Jeremy, do you want to speak to that? Otherwise, I feel like there were so many points that you made there, Mykola. I'm curious about, so the end of history, you see Lunarpunk very much focused on the end of history as like as a framing.
Yeah, of course. That's the total like Amir view on the world. Like there will be is this actually, I hear it within the Ukrainian-Russian war context when lots of lots of people are saying that it's a decline of Western world. The Europe and the States are losing their power. So we will see a great redistribution of power within the next economical crisis.
So the interesting thing to me is that it's exactly the opposite of the end of history, to my mind. I mean, I don't know if Amir uses the term end of history to describe this scenario, but for me, it's the beginning of history once again, because the end of history was announced, as we all know, in the 90s, right? It was this idea, okay, we've now found the perfect formula. It's going to be social democracy plus capitalism forever and for, all after, and, and the American empire is going to ensure that formula for arranging society is going to be perpetuated across the world. And then what we've seen is like, no, geopolitics is back. There's a kind of churning of the wheels of history once again. That kind of universalizing settlement didn't work out, right? But I don't know. I mean, maybe Amir means it more in the sense of like a total war or something.
Yeah. It's not like Fukuyama end of history. It's more like postmodernism, modernism sense of end of history. Like we need this Armageddon to cleanse ourselves for the next thing. And here is where you are saying that black in lots of Western tradition is associated with a certain death culture.
Exactly.
and it's kind of confuses people because the mainstream culture projects the bright colors as the salvation from boredom of life.
Exactly. And that's where I want to start opening up people's understanding a little bit and maybe like read some like non-Western philosophy to kind of get out of that, like the association of light and dark with, utopia or dystopia, or colors and the absence of colors, or nothingness and something, right? So, and I think there's right now I'm reading a super fascinating book that's an analysis of Yoruban culture and Yoruban political institutions in Nigeria. This is a total aside, but it makes some interesting points about the senses, and how, what's interesting about the emphasis of the eyesight in Western culture and Western philosophy is that it exactly creates that distinction between observer and observed, right? The subject and the object. So the subject observing the object, and by doing so, you create objective knowledge about the world, and therefore we can start building things and knowing things and doing things. And that emphasis on the eyesight actually also creates certain kind of relationships to the people around us, which, taken to its extreme, exactly results in surveillance, because there's this idea that you need observation in order to have any kind of understanding of the world, in order to know the world at all. And so therefore we need to have, the world in constant and increasing observation in order to know and understand the world better. To the detriment of other ways of knowing the world and other ways of understanding the world. And in this book, it emphasizes the oral history and emphasizes hearing as a way of knowing the world that does not rely on the subject-object division. And so therefore, like this whole, there's a lot more that's going on in that philosophy, but, it kind of goes around, it gets around a lot of problems that includes a kind of emphasis on gender in a certain way, and emphasis on power dynamics in a certain way, and so forth, so on and so forth. But the reason why I want to kind of emphasize that is because I think we can, to bring this to something much more, maybe a bit more kind of everyday for people, so we don't get lost in abstract theory. Like, if you think of the way that you experience sound and the way that you experience music is a much more immediate way than, reading a text. And this is not to say one is better than the other, but it's different ways of experiencing the world and different ways of knowing the world. That I think, we can start to emphasize and start to look into a little bit, where it's like Lunarpunk, it does not mean the absence of knowledge. It does not mean the absence of togetherness or the absence of community or the absence of knowing what each other are up to. It just means it's transmitted in a different way, right? It means it's a different way of being in the world. It means it's a different way of knowing each other. And I think the distinction between, for example, I don't know, this might be stretching things a little bit too far, but the distinction between like daytime and nighttime culture, what you do in the day and how you speak to people in the day, and then what you do in the evenings, and when you go to a club or whatever else, it's a different kind of community, it's a different way of knowing each other. And I think there's a lot to explore there. I think there's a lot to elaborate on that doesn't have to fall into the paranoid state of utopias versus dystopias.
Object-oriented ontology or not?
Sorry, say that again?
It's object-oriented ontology?
Yeah.
Okay, kudos. Actually, it's funny here, sorry for interrupting other speakers, that we all grow in a certain randomness, and I was introduced to OOO by my current. She has this kind of like artistic background, and she's like never-ending person who explores the new, let's say, theories on how to experience beauty of the world and art, which is incorporating beauty. And for her, this like OOO is the most beautiful thing that happened in life. And in this sense, I will maybe ask other speakers, like, okay, whenever it's Lunarpunk or Solarpunk, what are goals to be achieved? Like, what's your personal aspirations, where you want to go and lead the industry, the projects you are doing? What's the big vision? How do you see a certain, not end goal, but a certain goal for yourself?
Jeremy, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, I can throw down. So what I like about this question is it calls back your point on that sort of like winning the battle but losing the war. And that as opposed to an end, what I'm most interested in is a sense of both progress in not from like a developmental, but progress from a sense of motion. Like progress as observed by the feeling of wind in my hair, for lack of a better word. And as I sort of sit and think about this desire for motion, for action, I mean, in the like my childhood fantasy being, kick off the chains of capitalism, blah blah blah. When I think about that, there is both an argument to be made that the optimistic view, right? For lack of a better word, all I want is one step after the other. I'd settle for protopia over utopia any day of the week. But there's something about like that, again, that shining vision that like the way that beauty motivates my feet forward, the way that the sound of the siren seduces me and just has me in motion. But then when I think about like from a human behavior perspective, I go, yeah, but like we are like 10 times more motivated by fear than we are by optimism and by desire. So I'm finding myself in a squishy space where I go, perhaps the narrative, perhaps the story, perhaps the vision, the evocation of, there is something bump in the night to be legitimately afraid of. Maybe that has more power to make motion. But again, the argument comes back is, do we want to play to our lesser or our greater angels in that respect? Anybody else?
I don't know if fear is 10 times stronger than, what was it you said, optimism? Actually, I think desire is one of the strongest forces. Like desire is like that moves mountains, when you make something desirable. But otherwise, like when it comes to Mykola's question on what within Lunarpunk or Solarpunk we're hoping to advance on a personal basis in our work. In my work, when it comes to Lunarpunk, I've kind of emphasized earlier, I'd really like to kind of expand a little bit the mythology to include not so much the paranoid state, but more so it's not so much like being lost on your own in the dark, and therefore needing all the kind of guns and shields that you can possibly muster, but more, it's you around the campfire and you see lots of other campfires with lots of other friendly faces gathered around them. Across the landscape, and that's how I envision Lunarpunk. And I think there's a lot of scope there to expand the mythology in interesting directions that can maybe be more desire-led than fear-led. And then when it comes to Solarpunk, I think what is interesting and what I like about the Solarpunk aesthetic specifically is that it always evokes kindness in an interesting way. I quite like that. A very kind aesthetic. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have kind of major personal ambitions with Solarpunk. I think that mythology is kind of taking care of itself. My main personal ambition is to situate a little bit where ZK cryptography fits within all this, because the other reason why I'm not super convinced by the kind of dichotomy of these two mythologies is that zero knowledge proofs, to my mind, kind of disrupts that quite radically in ways that I think forces us to think beyond the kind of visible, invisible, you can either see or you can't see kind of analogy. Yeah.
May I butt in? This is, along the lines of kind of where my head was going. I think with both aspects, obviously, of Solarpunk and Lunarpunk, they both have real on the ground things that like relate to people, like where they have localized issues. Like I need to tend to my land and my food, and there's things that I need to do in my region. For other people, surveillance of their government, where there's like real fears or real issues of privacy that can really hurt them. I think all of these things exist on local issues, and perhaps not all of us are obviously, we're not living the same reality, right? We all live such different lives that I would almost encourage both aesthetics and narratives, these things to move forward, but also treat each other like sparring partners, like boxing partners, and strengthen each other and actually teach each other. Here's what I'm learning. Here's what's going on in my world here. Hey, this is what's happening with me over here. And keep each other in check and actually level each other up, because both are going to have perhaps different relationships with authority. They might have different relationships with, things that happened, different factors, and we're going to have to learn about that. And on your point, Jaya, about ZK Nym, I think this beautiful, mysterious third thing is that there are a lot of us, like, for example, with me, my Twitter bio used to be cultural and professional shapeshifter. Like, I don't like telling people things. Or maybe I choose to kind of tell them things based on who they are. Like, if someone asks me where I'm from, I have multiple answers to that. I have a story. I'll do a quick judgment and see, is this person interesting, or are they ready for this story, or are they not? And it's the same. I think Hux and I have had these discussions where it's like with different subcultures, different, obviously different kinds of music. Like you can go into one scene and really have fun, and then just say, okay, well, I'd also like to be this other thing too. And so this shape-shifting nature of wanting to express yourself and be free, but in these different areas, I think is cool. And maybe this is quite a stretch, but like to think about, like, you have so many music festivals getting bigger and bigger, and they have like multiple different genres that kind of flow into each other. And like I think it's quite liberating to be able to learn from different groups and enjoy what they have to offer.
Here's a funny thing. Within the Afrofuturism, there's I don't want to be racial here, but I mean the black color could be understood in so many different ways, and it's a cultural critique. And blended with the futurism, I check Black Quantum Futurism phenomena. It's the project facilitated by Moor Mother, who is just a wonderful artist, and they blend this speculative fiction, science fiction, with the black aesthetics beyond the skin color, and they shape narration in a way that is culturally accepted. It's inclusive, but it critiques, for example, interesting phenomena as Greenwich time, which is this white folks' time that also shapes how people in Africa live their lives. And within the narration that we are talking about, day and night. And within the music industry, there are lots of examples when the shades between underground and commercial artists were crossed so many times, and the division was smooth. When I was doing parties, DJing radio show in Kiev like 10 years ago, I believe in a certain middle way where you could be an underground, but at the same time be accessible to the public. Because if you love something, you want others to get into your interest. You want to share this thing, and you don't build barriers on the way of accepting your cultural reference. And in this sense, the problem that I see right now also with the Lunarpunks, not maybe less with Solarpunks, that they're building technocratic view on the world, which for non-tech people is highly non-inclusive. And in this sense, it creates egalitarian movement that is hard to be a part of. Thanks.
I just put some links in the chat. The group that Mykola we're talking about, the Black Quantum Futurism crew. They did a residency at CERN actually recently. I think the past year. So have a look. It's quite fun to read up on. But
And
in Barcelona as well. What did you say, Mykola?
Yeah. They received the grants from European Union on basically mediation on science fiction, CERN, and digital art, which is super cool.
Yeah. So the point that I wanted to make about zero knowledge proofs was a little bit kind of slightly along those lines, and it definitely okay. So on the one hand, it's what you were mentioning earlier, Vesta, about selective disclosure, right? So the idea that identity is not a fixed thing, and who you are and how you speak to your mother might be very different from who you are and how you speak to a shop owner or to a lover or whatever else. And so, in selective disclosure online, I think is definitely going to be a big thing. But I think there's something else going on also with zero knowledge proofs, which is the ability to prove something without revealing the underlying evidence, right? So, and that's where I think this it starts to break with this idea that you need visibility in order to know something or in order to prove something, even in the digital space. And it also opens up the question of who's actually doing the looking, right? When you have the ability to do computation on encrypted data sets and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot more there that is that for me just makes it feel a little bit like the solar and the lunar analogies are not going to be quite enough to capture what's happening in the digital space and what happens, at the mathematical level. And I mean, the kind of way that I like to think about it is that, when it comes to the internet, there is no real night and day in that sense. It's kind of, it's a different type of space, and it's a different way that that things operate, and visibility and invisibility, it just operates differently when we're talking about maths.
And there's two words which come to, sorry to interrupt with my scratchy voice, but what came to my mind frequently is to empower opting in, the opportunity for people to opt in on any of these things which is discussed. I think that's kind of a very short summary from my side. Sorry, and then I think I'm gonna be the party pooper because we're gonna have 7 minutes left from this beautiful call. So I would just like Vesta to ask our beautiful guest, maybe a last round of questions, or just to wrap up with thoughts, and then we're gonna do some housekeeping items and finish. If that's okay with all of you.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick up the mantle for final thought.
Perfect.
I always had a weird sort of thought experiment in my mind. In our world, duality of night and day seems so absolute, and I wondered if this is just perhaps a constant based on the fact that there's only one sun. I always imagined how much of a different experience, what type of different narratives and metaphors we might imagine if we were in a binary star system with two suns, or if we were on a moon orbiting a large planet that had these alternative states where it wasn't quite night and it wasn't quite day, that we existed in some form of twilight. How much different our metaphors and just our experience of reality might be. Anybody else?
I think that's a nice place to end it.
Go.
That was beautiful. No, Mykola, you go.
I said, asked at the beginning, how you came into privacy and stuff like that. And I think that in the middle of summer, my friend said, hey, I joined the status team and we have a super nice vacancy that is called Director of Activism. Do you want to try it out? And I'm like, Director of Activism in a Web3 company? What does it mean? How does it work? And then I found out that they're building a network state, Logos, this kind of like a grassroots movement. And I think this new concept that emerges within the market, like network states, parallel economies, people playing in these opt-out, opt-in scenarios, it broadens the possibilities that you could do with the market. For example, I'm a hater of the white DeFi, when the bunch of white guys control the DAO or all the protocols. And privacy for a person like me, or a privacy market, is an opportunity to realize my whatever it is potential. And it's an option. And then you can contribute to the market from any perspective, because in this sense, Lunarpunk, Solarpunk is just the next ideology, and we are embedded with so many ideologies, from what kind of music we listen to what kind of religion we're into, or what kind of even the food we eat and stuff like that. So in this sense, it would be nice that these radical or radical movements from positivistic side, or more the rich side, they will contribute more to the development of the market than to the disruption of the opponents, which sometimes sits on the same boat, and there's no point on fighting each other in the midst of the world we live in. Thanks.
Cool. So you came into the privacy space by essentially becoming the director of activism at Status. Is that what you said?
No. I failed that. I failed that interview with the first girl. She was a recruiter, and I would never speak to recruiters in my life, because it was just the wrong entry point for me articulating what I want to do. So in this sense, but it was the good trigger for me to be angry enough to do homework, and with all these reports, the things I'm doing on GitHub, I'm just taking chances and doing my stuff instead of waiting for others to give me opportunities and stuff like that.
Cool. So just a quick question, because you did, for anybody who's listening, do have a look at the web, this fantastic report on the status of privacy and privacy projects in the Web3 space. What's next now that you've collated that report?
Basically, it's the way to get out of what's the word for this? The wage slavery. And it's a big question for myself and to the market. Is an opportunity for skillful people to live within the parallel economy of grants and be independent, and not preached over any ecosystem from Polkadot to Cosmos. So in this sense, I just want to go and outreach the projects, and to see if they are willing to invest into advocacy instead of promoting their own niche things, in the sense of also fighting with each other to compete for the narrow audience, or broadening the market like that.
Cool. I'm sorry, I'm gonna not have us go over time. Hux, Vesta, do you want to wrap up?
Cool. Thank you all so much. No, it was an absolute joy to have you all here, and I think we could go on for ages. Each of you have such interesting experiences and beautiful minds. But I think this is only just the beginning. I think there's a lot we can explore here. So thank you so much. Hux and I maybe we'll do a round of housekeeping items. So the call here today was recorded, and we'll be sharing it with you. So if you want to listen to it again or share anything else, you can do that. Of course, suggestions for topics and guests are always welcome. You can put that in the channel, and you'll be able to also claim your POAP in the community call channel just above the Nym stage. Sorry, Hux, I think I just took most of the things. Is there anything
I just
I
want
missed?
to thank you all for being here with us on the first community call takeover by the community. Just so many words here. Yeah, thank you guys. And we're on time. So lots of love to you all.
Yeah.
No? You can
I mean,
finish.
we can stick around for a little bit for anyone who wants to yeah, have a chat.
And did you mention the
We could sit
POAPs
back,
in
but
the
yeah.
claim POAP thing?
Yes, so it's in the claim attendance. It's just above the Nym stage.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Mykola. Thank you, Jaya.
You know, I'll
Good
be
to meet you, Jeremy. Good to meet you, Mykola.
Okay.
And catch you soon.
Yeah.
yeah, and thank you, Jeremy and Mykola, so
My
much.
pleasure. Safe travels,
Yeah.
all.
You too.
See you guys. Eat lots of veggies and fruits, and listen to good music.
Mhm.
Read nice books. Oh, by the way, who's still on the call? I mean, it's still recording. Maybe we should stop the recording. But there's a funny thing on Netflix. I was sick. I could watch Netflix again. There's this super surveillance city kind of dystopian Netflix thing. Omnisciente. It's a Brazilian version. Check it out. Oh, yeah, Omniscient. Yeah,
Omniscient?
it's not. It's a Netflix thing. So it's not that well designed, but it's also it's funky. This